Welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for Tuesday, February 18th. First up, we'll take a look at significant wave heights across the North Pacific. Remnants of a gale have produced 22-foot seas off the Pacific Northwest coast, targeting primarily that area but reaching down into California. Also, remnants of a gale that was off of Japan on Monday with seas to 32 feet are now decaying. Seas in the 26-foot range, pushing east, targeting primarily Hawaii. Only small energy is expected into the California coast. Otherwise, a pretty calm pattern is in play. Let's take a look at jet stream level winds. This is at the 250 millibar level, about 30+ thousand feet up. Jet stream is what drives the storm track, also provides fuel for developing weather systems down at the ocean surface. As of right now, there is an interesting cutoff upper low off of Kamchatka, Russia area. This previously was associated with a split in the jet that was traveling up into this area, but it has since broken off and appears to be free and clear of the main flow. This is good news. Also of interest is 150 knot winds developing off Japan. Also notice the flow coming off of Japan is more cohesive than it's been. Rather than a large split sitting in this area, it's a rather small split. The flow basically travels northern branch, over the dateline and weak trough in the Gulf of Alaska, pushing into Pacific Northwest. The southern branch pretty much following a very similar pattern, just displaced further south, tracking over Hawaii. A small bit of energy is bleeding off to the south towards the equator, but all in all, this looks like a step in the right direction. Let's put this into motion now and see what happens. Notice immediately by Wednesday we're up to 190 knot winds starting to build off of Japan. This is really good news. It suggests that indeed the split pattern that's been in control for several weeks now is perhaps over. Wind energy is building into the jet, it's consolidating and making headway at least to the dateline by Wednesday, and as we roll this out, we're into, let's go 72 hours out. You have a 190 knot wind slightly ridging over the dateline, providing good fuel for storm development with a little bit of a trough trying to develop north of Hawaii. Notice that the northern branch now splits off and is basically encased over land over its entire coverage in this image, and then there's this slight southward split here. But still, the main focus for storm development would be over in this region and primarily in this trough. Now, this is not a good trough, won't support strong, even gale development, but it's a step in the right direction. Continue to put this in motion. You notice this pocket of wind energy continues to make better eastward progress as we get into Sunday. Some degree of a trough remains here. Whatever high pressure and whatever is going on here in this split area is getting severe pressure from this pocket of wind energy. Put this into motion, and then we're into Tuesday. Continue to have a trough here. The split is ridiculously exaggerated, almost retrograding, and then goes into the U.S. West Coast. But it sort of looks like this area of wind energy is taking over, and we'll roll it out there to 180 hours. The issue still, though, is there's no real clear trough. There's a bit of trough here pushing into the Gulf by the middle of next week and in relative close proximity to the U.S. West Coast. It sort of suggests that at some point this pocket of wind energy is just going to blast right into the U.S. West Coast, and this quickly fading split pattern could be ancient history. A little bit of concern, though, is there's more of a diffuse pattern suggested back here over Asia, so it's hard to tell whether this is going to last or not. The interesting part about this, we'll sort of jump to later on in the presentation. The active phase of the MJO is building right now. That's likely adding fuel to the jet stream and responsible for this good, strong push of the jet. So something to look forward to. Down at the ocean surface, we'll examine surface level winds and pressure. And as seen in the significant wave height chart, there is clearly some fetch in the Gulf of Alaska. Nothing significant though, 30, maybe 35 knot westerly winds, generating the 22-foot seas we saw there. That swell is about ready to hit the U.S. West Coast, in the Pacific Northwest first, and then down into California, I believe, on Wednesday. Remnant low pressure from a previous stronger gale off Japan, still circulating, 35 knot westerly winds. This is setting up, there we go, look at it this way. Wind energy pushing down the what is that, about 305 degree path to Hawaii, but much less so relative to California, either north or south. Most of the energy is pushing south of the Great Circle Track, so not a big swell producer for California. Let's put this into motion, see how things evolve. So by Wednesday, pretty much the gale system in the Gulf peters out. The system that was off Japan continues to push east, but dropping down to 30 knot winds. Roll that out. It continues to push along. That's good for 13-second period swell, maybe 20-foot seas as it pushes over the date line on Friday. Again, all this is aimed more at Hawaii than the U.S. West Coast, so that's good. Someone's going to be getting some swell, while high pressure sets up off California. Again, nestled in the split upper level pattern that we saw in the previous, in the jet stream charts. So we'll roll this out. Again, low pressure continues to work its way east into Saturday and Sunday. Oh, and here we go. And then finally something starts organizing from it. Very small, though. We're talking a tiny area of 40 knot winds Sunday. Oh, I thought I was, there we go. It looks like, you can't see it quite over the label, but it almost looks like there's some 55 knot winds in there at some point. We'll check that out a little bit more later. And 45 knot winds continue to push east into Monday with a secondary system forming behind that. This is likely fueled by that trough in the jet stream that we saw almost a week out now. Secondary system, not particularly large, but and then you get into, here we go, into Tuesday. Broad area of low pressure now, getting very close to the U.S. West Coast. Maybe suggestive if the jet could push on through, there'd be another weather event and rain and snow, probably a warm one again. Just seems to be the pattern of late. But that's something that California and basically the whole West Coast needs, so any precipitation is good news. Now let's take a look at the effects of the jet stream and the winds at the surface, how they're doing on the ocean in terms of swell production. Put this into motion. We're into Wednesday, and basically the system in the Gulf is pretty much over. The system off Hawaii is pretty much fading. You get out, here we go, 20-foot seas, 22-foot seas, again targeting Hawaii down the 305 degree track. This is into Thursday night and Friday, but nothing significant in terms of swell production, you know, maybe 12, 13-second period swell, that's about it. But then as we roll out, I mean, there's basically a pretty good period of nothing going on until you get into Sunday. And then this first little gale from the supercharged jet that has a bit of a trough there starts forming 28-foot seas on Sunday night. Small area of 32-foot seas, and by small we're talking tiny. That's down the 283 degree path into Northern California and the 292 degree path for Southern California, so a little bit too far north to be optimal there, but still it's relatively nearby, which is good news. And then right after that it sort of fades out. Another one starts to form behind it, but not particularly well organized. So, but at least there is low pressure forecast week out off the U.S. West Coast. Hawaii could get sideband energy from the system. We'll sort of put it back. You notice that most of the energy is cutting across the paths, not pushing down to Hawaii. So the most likely scenario is sideband energy, especially from this 13-second period, what looks to be 13-second period energy later. We're talking a week out though, so it's hard to know whether that's going to really occur or not. Most of the energy, U.S. West Coast. Next, let's take a look at long-term what's going on, and this is where things get a bit more interesting. The atmosphere as of right now is not doing a whole lot. It's kind of a strange situation, but there's some suggestions of something more significant going on. Just suggestions, nothing more, but we'll go through the numbers here. First off, we had a short but interesting run of negative SOI numbers, daily SOI numbers. This is the difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia and Tahiti. Negative numbers suggest the active phase of the MJO, and prolonged negative numbers over a month or more or two could suggest El Nino. We're nowhere near any of that. Most of these numbers are positive for the daily reading, 8.36. 30-day running average 4.44, so just above neutral, and the 90-day average 6.31, a little bit above neutral as well. If you were to graph out the 30-day SOI average, you'd see that we are finally making tracks towards neutral from a rather large spike that's been going on all January into early February. And you notice the trend, if you drew a line here, has been steadily upward since the summer, suggestive of almost La Nina rather than El Nino. Not good, and it's definitely above neutral, so we can't even hardly say that we're in neutral territory anymore. But that's sort of the trend as of right now. Looking down at the surface, let's look at deviations from normal of wind speed over the West Pacific. Australia here, maritime continent, dateline is right here. Notice relatively moderate to strong westerly anomalies are currently occurring over the maritime continent. This is the second such episode in literally a month's duration that this has happened. That is somewhat significant because the trend for the past couple of years has been for easterly anomalies. Now we have westerly anomalies. This is good news. This is at least suggestive of the active phase of the MJO, and this is also what's likely responsible for goosing up the jet stream and increasing wind speeds there, which in turn adds fuel to help support storm formation. As we move to the dateline, kind of neutral anomalies, maybe slightly westerly. Continuing on, that sort of fades, and then you get to about south of Hawaii, and you notice there's been this persistent pocket of easterly anomalies over the Central Pacific. Kind of strange, kind of interesting at the same time, and then everything goes neutral as you get into Central America. Looking a week out, it gets even more interesting. Westerly anomalies persist and rather strong over the entire maritime continent and pushing over to the dateline, rather weak on the dateline and a little bit east of there. And then you go into the Central Pacific south of Hawaii, and again persistent easterly anomalies there. So one would say this is associated with the inactive phase of the MJO, and one could say this is the active phase of the MJO. But the interesting part about this is this sort of locked-in pattern has been going on now for a month or more, and seems to be a little bit more than just a typical MJO cycle. So something to consider. Here's a time-lapse look at the same thing. West Pacific on this side of the chart, East Pacific on this side. We have time down here. Red is westerly anomalies, blue is easterly anomalies. And what you see is here is the previous westerly wind burst that basically went the whole way through January, peaking out around the 27th, 28th, rather strong winds. And now here we are into February 16th, and we already have another burst of westerly winds occurring and forecast to continue for at least a week. This is interesting indeed, because a westerly wind burst, especially one this strong, likely would produce a Kelvin wave, which is warm water pushing east, at least a precursor to El Nino. and now we have potentially a second Kelvin wave within a month's period of time starting to develop. Something to consider again. Looking at outgoing long wave radiation forecasts, blue suggests increased cloudiness and the active phase of the MJO. Yellows, red, oranges suggest high reflectivity off the ocean's surface, trade winds, and the inactive phase of the MJO. This is the statistic model. Statistic model suggests indeed a active phase of the MJO is in effect on the dateline. That is supposed to slowly peter out over the next 15 days. Conversely, the dynamic model suggests the active phase is in play and it is only to get a little bit stronger and then basically hold for the next 15 days. If this were to occur, that would be an extremely good sign, especially in terms of producing yet another Kelvin wave. Of some interest is the inactive phase bottled up into the Indian Ocean, and in both models it goes nowhere, which is good news. And looking even further out, here's a jet stream level depiction of the of what could be inferred to be the MJO. This is a 40-day look. So currently we have the green is supportive of precipitation, again suggestive of the active phase of the MJO. The reds and oranges are the inactive phase. So what we have is our current active phase, and that wave, it's basically a wave, continues into Central America through the 15th of March. So it takes basically a whole month for the active phase to make it across the Pacific and then head off into the Atlantic. And behind that, the inactive phase builds probably about the 10th of March, and then basically goes the whole way through the month of March, and then right behind it, another active phase of the MJO. So this is the strongest MJO pattern we've seen probably in 3 years setting up. That's kind of good. It suggests maybe a return to normal at a minimum, if not something more. Next, we take a look at surface level water temperatures, ocean water temperatures, and we'll just get right to the heart of the matter. Cooler than normal waters over the Central Pacific in the Nino 3.4 region. Very perplexing, very strange, especially considering the westerly wind burst activity that's going on over here. We actually had warm water piled up off of Peru and Chile a month ago. It almost looked like a weak El Nino signature. That's all been wiped out. There's some discussion or some thoughts that this is a normal response to a Kelvin wave impacting South America. Seems like a little bit more than that, especially how cool it is right in this region. This is not good to support storm development. This kind of puts a damper on things. It helps sort of mitigate energy transfer into the upper levels of the atmosphere and puts a damper on storm development in the North Pacific in winter months. Otherwise, we have, again, this consistent pattern of warm water that's been between Japan and the U.S. West Coast. It's actually making inroads now into California. Trades, high pressure that has been in control here appears to be pretty much suppressed. There's no upwelling coming off of California towards the equator. That's all gone now. So that's kind of more normal looking. Regarding the cool pool here, we sometimes look to see a mirror image of it appearing off of Africa. There's no real signs of that happening. So this whole thing is really quite perplexing. But at this point in time, we'll just continue to monitor. Here's another view, anomalies, surface level, water temperatures, and winds. You notice some of the there it is. This is actual wind speed and direction. Notice westerly, not anomalies, real westerly winds blowing on the equator. The anomalies highlighted or amplify it even more. Here's the cool pool, 0 degrees, going to about 170 west. -1 degrees, south of Baja and California area on the equator. There's some suggestion this is not as defined it was even a couple of days ago, and that this whole pool is moving to the east. That would be good news, and that's what we'd want to see. But the far more interesting image is this one here. This is the West Pacific. This is the East Pacific. We're on the equator and we're looking at depth, 200 meters, 100 meters. A pocket of 4.5, almost 5 degree above normal water temperatures, and they are moving east. This is not just a little Kelvin wave, but a rather massive Kelvin wave, seeing how it fills the entire chart. Again, here's the perplexing part, though. -1 degree, almost -2 degree subsurface water temperatures off of South America. The question is, will this warm water moving east be able to push through and sort of wipe out this cool water regime here? One would assume so, but it's always best to never assume anything when it comes to the weather. At this point, we'll leave it a question mark, see how it evolves over the next couple of weeks, but this is a significant Kelvin wave. This is not a minor Kelvin wave. This is a large one, and the assumption is once it gets some momentum behind it, which it probably already does, it will blast through this, but something to watch. And the assumption is if more westerly winds are blowing over the maritime continent, yet more warm water will be forced downward and either add to this existing Kelvin wave or create a second Kelvin wave. So there is going to be a significant eastward transport of warm water if everything goes as the models suggest. And finally, projections from the CFS version 2 model for water temperatures in the Nino 3.4 region. This is basically where the cold waters are right now that we've been talking about, and the forecast is for increasing water temperatures over the coming 6 months or more. Right now, there's the negative water temperatures. Supposedly, come mid-February, maybe March, a significant increase in temperatures is to start setting up. Once you're at the half a degree range, you're almost into El Nino territory, and by October, we're talking a 1 degree increase in water, or 1 degree above normal water temperatures. That is not huge on the El Nino scale by any means. If it was 1.5, 2 degrees, that would be significant. But again, this model has been suggesting warming water temperatures for a year or more, and it hasn't materialized. So it's kind of hard to believe just this one model, but there's consensus amongst a bunch of other models that also suggest some degree of a warming pattern occurring. So it's kind of up in the air exactly how much will happen, if it will even happen. But at this point in time, there's more warm water pushing east in the form of Kelvin waves than we've seen in 3 years. So that's all a good sign, and suggests that next year's long-term surf forecast should certainly be better than what we've been seeing the past 3 years. So that's pretty much it for this update. The good news is Kelvin wave in the water. Another westerly wind burst occurring over in the maritime continent. That all suggests long-term that we could be looking at a much better surf pattern, maybe by the summer. But for the short term, it's still kind of a weak immediate outlook, but the jet stream looks to be picking up, and the MJO is turning active again. So that's all good news, and hopefully we'll get something from it in the next week or two. Thanks for watching. See you again next week, same time, same channel.